Welcome back to the show, Upper Hand Fantasy Podcast. I am Faraz Siddiqui. I'm here with Zach Rizzuto. We are doing, by popular demand, we weren't going to do this episode, but we kept on getting requests to do a single quarterback Dynasty rookie mock draft. All right, we did our Superflex draft last week. It was Joe, Zach, and myself. Joe just completely whiffed on the timing of this show today. Okay, so he is permanently, temporarily banned from the Upper Hand Fantasy Podcast. Okay, Joe?
It's a bannable offense.
Yes, exactly. Permanently, temporarily banned, Joe. Okay? It's just me and Zach, but that's okay because I like Zach way more. So this is going to be a fun one. One quarterback, 12 teams, 4 rounds. It's going to be a little different, right? Because it was easy to take a lot of these quarterbacks early. Now we really have to get into the nitty gritty. Later in the 3rd, 4th rounds, we're going to see guys that we didn't see go off the board the first time around because we're going to have to dig a little deeper into our sleeper bucket, if you may, for these rookies. Obviously, the 3rd and 4th rounds are the guys that we're going for in terms of these shots in the dark, right? And those are the guys that we're going for. There might be a couple guys that could make a year 1 impact potentially. So we'll see. All right. So now, Zach, we're going to just alternate picks. Okay. So you're going to go ahead and go number 1. I'll go number 2, and we keep on going from there. Okay. Again, 1 quarterback dynasty, non-superflex. Okay, 1 quarterback. I said that already. And that's going to be a rookie mock draft. Zach, let's take it away, baby. Who you got at 101?
I'm on the clock, and I was just talking about it with you before the podcast. I said I'm still partial a little bit to quarterbacks, especially when it's someone like Caleb Williams. I don't think there's an argument, though, to put him over Marvin Harrison here. I'm going to go with Marvin Harrison here because he's in the perfect situation right off the bat to earn a bunch of targets. Obviously, he has to compete with Trey McBride, but he's the only other real target competition that I'm worried about in Arizona. He's got a good quarterback to throw to him, and he's just in the situation that we all thought he would be in. We all figured he would be the first wide receiver off the board in the draft. He was. The Cardinals were one of the more popular landing spots. We've kind of been like assuming this was how it was going to be, coming into the drafts, even since before the draft. So I think you go with the obvious pick here, Marvin Harrison. He's guaranteed in my book. I'm penciling him in for at least 100 targets and 70 some receptions. He's going to be absolutely rock solid for you right off the bat, and he can improve with Kyler Murray, like I mentioned. He's got good long-term prospects, and what separates him from Malik Nabers for me is that short-term prospect as well. This year, he's going to be much better, much more productive, I think, and especially in terms of touchdowns.
Let me ask you this. What do you think at the end of the day, after his rookie season, what is his target share going to be?
Marvin Harrison's?
Yep.
As long as Trey McBride is there, and we've seen Kyler Murray, he tends to prefer. Yeah, he has a little preference for Trey McBride. He was hyper-targeted. I think Trey McBride was the most targeted on a per-route basis last year among tight ends. So that's not anything that you could just throw to the side. We know that the Cardinals just signed Zay Jones. It's a 1-year thing, so he might not linger after next year. They might go draft another wide receiver depending on where they're at with the rest of the wide receiver room because they are a little thin behind Marvin Harrison. He's a really nice Band-Aid for a wide receiver room that's missing some dynamic playmakers outside of him. I think that he's going to probably challenge for that 25-6%. I think that can eventually go up to that 28, 9, 30% further down the line. I don't know if his second year he's going to do that, but I think he's definitely, obviously he has it within him during his rookie contract to make it to that 29, 30% range that we really like to see. 25, though, as a standard, I wouldn't be surprised if he hits that this season, especially later in the year.
That's kind of the number that I was thinking of, too. In his rookie year, straight off the bat, I think both him and Trey McBride above 20%. Maybe, like Trey McBride, 22, 23% target share. Marvin Harrison, 25% target share. Top-heavy distribution. I love it. Okay. Pick 2. I'm going with Rome Odunze. And I know Malik Nabers sitting right there. Going to get a lot of volume in year 2. He was my pre-draft wide receiver 2, but it was really maybe a 2A, 2B type of situation for me between Nabers and Odunze. I think Odunze profiles as a wide receiver 1 alpha X type of receiver. at the next level. And now he's paired with Caleb Williams, who, if we are taking him at 101 in Superflex, and he is not a Lamar Jackson type of Konami code type of quarterback, although he does have some, sneaky scrambling ability, I do think that at the end of the day, I do think that Rome Odunze paired with somebody who we expect to be a potential superstar quarterback in the NFL, paired with him over the next, 7, 8 seasons, maybe. That's a rock star pairing. We have no idea who Malik Nabers is going to be paired with. We know who he's going to be paired with this year. I do expect the volume to be there for Malik Nabers, but I just don't know what that situation is going to look like. I think he'll be fine. Usually these type of situations take care of themselves. If you're an elite wide receiver, you're going to put up elite numbers for the most part. So at the end of the day, I'm going to go with the guy who I think I have a little bit more faith in long term because of his quarterback situation. And I kind of like the overall situation with Shane Waldron and those guys in Chicago. So I'm going to go Rome Odunze here. I don't think there's any surprise who you're taking at number 3.
I don't know. It's tough. My question for you was going to be whether it was a quarterback that made the difference for you between Rome Odunze and Malik Nabers. It seems like that is the case, 100%. And I think I'm with you there because I don't like Malik Nabers' situation at all. Like if Malik Nabers went to a Chargers team, someone obviously they use their first round pick, the one that they would have been in range for Malik Nabers. They use that on offensive tackle, Joe Alt. But if he went to the Chargers, like that completely changes the complexion of where I think Malik Nabers' career trajectory is going, because right now there's so much unknown. The quarterback, we don't know what's going on. There's no running back really situation there. There's no run game going on there. The offense, there's just so much uncertainty. It's like as good as Malik Nabers can be, I think it's just like tanked his stock, which really pisses me off. And I've been saying that up until the draft so much. But I'm looking at the board now. It's Malik Nabers, Brock Bowers, Caleb Williams. I'm not really looking at Brock Bowers, not because he's not a good prospect, but because of the positional value, especially with him going to Las Vegas. Quarterback situation is shaky. I'm ruling him out at this pick. I really like Malik Nabers just because we know that dynasty teams are built on wide receivers, and Malik Nabers is an elite receiver. You just have to hope and take on that risk that we just talked about. His situation kind of figures itself out, which I think over time it can. It'll correct. I don't think Daniel Jones is the answer for New York. I don't think he's going to get Malik Nabers to reach his true potential. I don't think that's in the range of outcomes for him, especially this year or long term. So hopefully they don't sign Daniel Jones to another extension or keep him longer than this year, because that's what I think they're attached to him for, guaranteed. I think they can move on from him next year. Not exactly sure off the top of my head. It's between Nabers and Williams, and I'm going to say I'm going to go with Malik Nabers here. Just I know I was just talking about how Caleb Williams is, I'm a little bit partial to quarterbacks here, but I'm going to go with Malik Nabers because I think I want to roll the dice just a little bit. If I'm there, the other top receivers are off the board. I want to roll the dice just a little bit and say, okay, I'll take on that risk where we might not have the quarterback situation right now, but I'm going to bet that it's going to figure itself out, and Malik Nabers will find his way to be one of the top receivers in the league because his profile is just so good coming out of college.
I'm with you, man. I think this is how the top 3 should go, man. Honestly, don't worry too much about Malik Nabers' situation. I don't think on a scale of 1 to 10, I don't think this is a 0, right? I think it's maybe a 5 out of 10. I don't think it's so bad. I think he'll be fine. Also, one thing to consider is that there was no high-end wide receiver that Daniel Jones has ever played with that you can say like, oh, Daniel Jones like just ruined his year or ruined his career or didn't, have that player live up to his potential. Remember a couple of years ago when we had like 3 no-name wide receivers like putting up fantasy points? Can you remember that?
Yeah.
That was Daniel Jones.
Isaiah Hodgins.
Maybe elevating Isaiah Hodgins, maybe elevating what's that dude's name? See, I don't even remember their names. Like, this is what I'm saying.
Darius Slayton had a game or two, I know. Wan'Dale Robinson, when he was healthy, had a couple high target share games.
There you go.
I'll give you that. I'll give you that.
So Malik Nabers now, this is what Daniel Jones has been looking for all along. And now, listen, I'm not going to go as far to say like Daniel Jones is all he needs. He was just missing that one piece, that final infinity stone to make him a good quarterback. I don't know if that's going to be the case, but I do think that Nabers is the pick here. Don't overthink it. Okay, Zach was overthinking it here, in my opinion. Okay.
Maybe a little bit, but I think before I move on, one more thing. I think another thing that salvages Malik Nabers' situation a little bit. Sure, the quarterback situation isn't ideal, but like you mentioned, who else is he going to throw to? Is he, who on the offense is going to demand targets away from Malik Nabers? Whether it's a wide receiver or a tight end, we don't know if Darren Waller is even going to play. It seems like he's not going to at this point. There's no run game. If there's going to be offense, there's a good chance it's going to be Nabers. So I think that's also something you can fall back on, taking him at 3.
All right, so at 4, this one, for me too, it's like a very similar type of situation, where, Brock Bowers not the most ideal landing spot. And I think the only reason why most of us are not assuming this is a good landing spot is not because of the target competition that he might have initially with Devontae Adams, maybe Jacoby Myers or anything like that. I think it's because of the fact that they drafted a highly touted tight end of a pretty good prospect the year before, pretty early, right? And now, he kind of comes in and, okay, well, does he get the route participation that we want? Is there a little bit of a share in role? Is he going to get, the target share that we want initially? But I think the fact that he was taken this early, the fact that he was such a good prospect, this is a very similar type of situation to Malik Nabers. I think I regardless, I'm going to have to go Brock Bowers here. I think just the fact that he's such an elite prospect and you could potentially get a game-changing type of player at a position that, screams, positional advantage if you can get that guy. That's what I want, right? So I do think that he is the pick here. I don't want to get cute with it. Brian Thomas Jr. has his flaws. Xavier Worthy has his flaws. Ladd McConkey has his flaws. And might not have as much upside, might not have as much of that positional advantage potential that someone like Brock Bowers can have. And I'm not considering Caleb Williams here. Okay, when Brock Bowers is on the board, but now that Brock Bowers is off the board, Zach, you're here at pick 5. The guys that I mentioned are on the board. Who are you going with?
So at 4, with Brock Bowers on the board, I think there's a case for not taking Caleb Williams. But now that you come further down the board and you have Xavier Worthy, like you mentioned, Jonathan Brooks, I'm a little tempted to kind of go for here because I think he's going to be a better running back. He's a very strong profile. It's just that ACL tear, like we talked about in the last episode. I won't go too far into it because I know we talked about it already. That's the only thing that might be scaring people off. It's clean. I'm just going to kind of push that to the side when I'm looking at Jonathan Brooks. Ladd McConkey's there. Brian Thomas is there. Ladd McConkey's going to be in a run-first offense, so I don't know if he's the best player on the board right now. Xavier Worthy, he's going to be competing with Marquise Brown, Travis Kelce, and probably Rashee Rice at some point. His legal situation is going to be sorted out. There's probably going to be some sort of suspension, but he's going to be dealing with Rashee Rice at least for the beginning of his career, Xavier Worthy in Kansas City. So I'm looking at the ability to contribute for all these players, day one and long term, the best combination of all that. I know it's not super flex. I'm going to go with Caleb Williams here because I'm pretty confident he's going to be a top 10 quarterback right off the bat based on the weapons that he has alone. You just look at the offense that he's stepping into. It's arguably one of the best, if not the best situation that a rookie has stepped into in quite some time, at least since I've been alive. And then you look at what he can do long term, not just this year, if they continue to build around him as if they haven't already built around him. I think you can't pass that up because at the end of the day, he's going to be scoring a lot of points for you. If you're in a situation where your quarterbacks, you don't have one of those Konami code quarterbacks, like you mentioned, the rushing quarterbacks, if you don't have one of them, I think Caleb Williams, he's not one of them either, but I think he's top of the line in terms of what you get outside of Konami code quarterbacks. So he's going to be, I think, contending for a top 5, 6, 7 finish every year, as long as he has the supporting cast that he has with him. And Keenan Allen can go. He might have 1 or 2 more years left in him, but by the time he's done, they're going to have reloaded at wide receiver again. So the situation's perfect. I know that it's not super flex, but I'm going to go with Caleb Williams because he's going to be scoring the most points out of any of these guys, I think, on a yearly basis, the rest of the way that are on the board.
All right, I can see a case for Caleb Williams here, but from a value perspective, he would have to be, top 5, top 6 type of quarterback for him to return where he's at right now. Now, I don't think guys like Lad McConkey, Xavier Worthy, Brian Thomas Jr. are slam dunk type of prospects. I don't, right? So Caleb Williams, is he more of a slam dunk than those three guys? Yeah, probably. But in a single quarterback league, I personally like, and it also depends on your league, right? Sometimes in your league, your quarterback, quarterbacks get taken earlier. You would know based on the type of league you're in, and you may want to trade down a little bit, maybe secure another later round pick, and you'll potentially be able to get Caleb Williams once those three guys are off the board, right? It could potentially happen. So it really depends on your league, and I would not I wouldn't do this based on what your team needs are, unless your league straight up just doesn't trade at all. If your league just like, they refuse to trade, then you got to do what you got to do, get your quarterback if you have none, sure, whatever.
Right.
Me personally, like, I'm going to take Brian Thomas Jr. here, with this pick at 106. And I'm taking him over Xavier Worthy. I'm taking him over Lad McConkey. I think Brian Thomas Jr. He probably has the most upside of these guys, and I think he has some development to do. But the stuff that he does well, he can already contribute right away. Is he going to be like the 25% target share earner like Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to be early on in his rookie career? I don't think so. I think he is going to stretch the field. And I keep bringing up DK Metcalf. That's a similar type of skill set that he has right now. And DK Metcalf, even in his rookie year, he contributed nicely. Wasn't a consistent fantasy player, but he still came through. And I think that if he develops, he can become a complete beast, in the NFL. So I'm going for upside here personally. And some might think, well, what about Xavier Worthy? Like, he has upside too. Just curious, Zach, are you going Xavier Worthy here? Are you going Lad McConkey here with your next pick? And we can kind of go there. I think, are you not going with either of those guys?
I'm not looking at Xavier Worthy right now. And I just mentioned with the target competition that he's going to have, we know Travis Kelce's there for 2 years. I figure he's going to play the rest of that out and probably be pretty good, doing it as long as Patrick Mahomes is the quarterback. And then you also have Rashee Rice and Marquise Brown there. I look at both of those receivers, Rashee Rice especially, assuming he gets his legal situation cleared up, he was earning targets. Like, let's not sugarcoat anything. He was one of the target earning receivers in the league, one of the highest target earning receivers in the league, especially down the stretch last season. And we were all excited about him before this whole legal situation came up. So let's not forget the type of receiver that he is. Xavier Worthy is going to have to compete with that. Patrick Mahomes, he's going to distribute the ball. He's throwing it all over the yard. He's not going to hyper focus, it seems like, on one receiver, unless it's Travis Kelce, like it was last season. And the whole offense last season, it was a little underwhelming compared to what we were used to. I'm not saying you can't get back to what it was, but for me, there's a lot of target competition. I don't trust Xavier Worthy to earn those targets right off the bat. Where a guy like Lad McConkey, I think he's going to go right in. And yes, it's going to be a run-first offense. I think he's going to earn the targets right away because there's really nobody else to throw to. And I don't want to just, gloss over Quentin Johnston, who was a first-round pick last year. I don't want to just lose him in the wash. But at the same time, it's like, can we really project him to take significant targets away from a guy like Lad McConkey this season, especially when they profile two completely different ways? And we also seen that Justin Herbert, he wasn't super keen on targeting him anyway. Now, obviously, the circumstances have changed. We've lost Mike Williams in that offense and Keenan Allen. So maybe Quentin Johnston can make a little noise, but I don't think it's going to be any type of noise to take away from Lad McConkey getting, I think, 100 targets. And I know that's the number I painted for Marvin Harrison as well. But I think Lad McConkey can get 100 targets even in a run-first offense. So he's a really solid, safe pick. I'm leaning him right now because we know wide receivers are very valuable, but I'm also looking at Jonathan Brooks. I'm going to stick with Lad McConkey here just because we know wide receivers are more valuable. I'm going to assume that the team I'm drafting for doesn't need a running back to put them over the top.
And I do want to get into, the difference between these two guys, right? And I think Lad McConkey is the pick who, if you're looking for somebody who can make a huge difference year one for your team, potential wide receiver 3 every single week, I think that's Lad McConkey. I think Brian Thomas Jr. is going to be a lot more up and down. If you want a little bit more steady production, I think McConkey can give that to you. As Justin Herbert's, I think, de facto number 1 wide receiver right now. And I do think McConkey can get 120 targets. And by the way, Marvin Harrison Jr., man, if we're if we're looking at 25% target share, we're looking at like 130 targets for him, man, maybe more. Okay, so
right.
that's quite the rookie year right there. But Ladd McConkey, I don't think he has the upside to be like a legit, wide receiver one in the NFL. I think he can do that in certain offenses. Maybe this one can be one of those offenses, but it's going to be run heavy but funnel pass offense into McConkey, opposed to like a pass first offense with McConkey being a part of that. So I like McConkey. I think him and Brian Thomas Jr. are interchangeable here, depending on what you're looking for. I'm shooting more for upside. And potentially being that, Brian Thomas Jr. has that chance to be an elite wide receiver one in the NFL. Now, I am gonna go Xavier Worthy here at this point at the 8th spot. Okay, so Marvin Harrison Jr., Rome Odunze, Malik Nabers, Brock Bowers, Caleb Williams, Brian Thomas Jr., Ladd McConkey, and Xavier Worthy. That's the first 8 picks of this draft, and I think this is how it can go. Like Caleb Williams, like for me personally, like he might not even be in this top 8, but I can totally understand why. Xavier Worthy, he has to deal with you, and you alluded to it earlier. He has to deal with Hollywood Brown. He has to deal with Travis Kelce. He has to deal with Rashee Rice. Rashee Rice, let's say, suspended for 6 games still, right? Like, is Xavier Worthy going to take his spot? No, I don't think so. I think Rashee Rice is playing a very specific role on this offense, out of the slot, underneath, yards after the catch. Xavier Worthy can have some of that, but also play some deep. But then Hollywood Brown has a lot of that, right? So there's going to be a lot of overlap here for Xavier Worthy. So at the end of the day, he doesn't profile as this like elite wide receiver. However, his production profile is very good. His efficiency profile coming out of college was pretty good. So he was an early breakout round. Round 1 wide receiver, right? Round 1, right? Yeah, the Chiefs traded up in round 1 to get him. And now I think, initially, you're looking at this, you're like, wow, man, another wide receiver to pair with Patrick Mahomes. You got to rate him higher. But then, like, now you really break it down. I think Xavier Worthy, is going to have to fight for targets for sure. And he might have to do that for a couple seasons. Hollywood Brown probably won't be there next year on that 1-year deal, kind of like a prove it deal. And then he'll probably get a bag somewhere else. We'll see if he ends up getting signed by Kansas City. I doubt it, but we'll see what kind of year he has. But this is kind of how I see it going. Who you got at 9 after that trio who often seem to be going together? Brian Thomas Jr., Ladd McConkey, and Xavier Worthy. Who are you taking at number 9?
It is funny. You look at the board, we got the big 3 wide receivers going in their group, their little cluster, and then the next group of them go in their little cluster, back to back to back. Brian Thomas, Ladd McConkey, Xavier Worthy. I think that's how it should go. But that is pretty interesting because it's not very often that happens a whole lot, that there's just like these clear tier breaks. Because do you have the feeling that we've kind of reached another tier break here? Obviously, with Thomas, McConkey, and Worthy off the board, like you look at who's left in terms of receivers. I guess I should say at least at the receiver position, wide receiver. Like
at the receiver position, yes.
Yeah, this is a clear tier break for you, I think.
Yes.
And I'm going to separate that tier break with another off position, which is going to be running back. And I think now we can go for Jonathan Brooks because he is 20 years old. We know he's coming off of that injury. We just explained it earlier. But he's going to be in an offense where he's going to have a chance to just take over the backfield from day one. I'm not worried about Miles Sanders contributing because he couldn't beat out Chuba Hubbard. Chuba Hubbard's there. He's not anything to sneeze at. He's not somebody that you're just going to write off. But I think he's eventually going to be overtaken by Jonathan Brooks in his backfield, if not sooner rather than later, assuming that Jonathan Brooks stays healthy, stays clean through training camp. There's no complications with the injury. Jonathan Brooks comes back. We heard Dave Canales talk about it, that they want to get him involved in the receiving game. That's the key, especially early on. If you're not going to be playing a full complement of snaps, if the snaps that you're running at least are in the receiving game, you're getting those touches in the receiving game, that's a redeeming quality right there. So you don't need to have 80, 90% of snaps to get it done. You could be sitting at 55, 60, 65, get the receiving work that you need and be able to come through, especially in PPR formats. Now, this is, of course, PPR that we're talking about. He might not be as useful, if he's going to be splitting some work on the ground or near the goal line with Chuba Hubbard. But I think you look at the receiving upside that he has. I think he's going to end up taking over the backfield by the end of the season. And then, you're looking good long term as long as he stays healthy. I think Jonathan Burks is the pick here. I think he's a clear pick here based on the way the board has fallen. What do you think?
Is he the clear pick, though? Is he the clear pick? Because I think there's somebody else here that has a case to be taken at 109, at the end of the first, 110. And I think that's Jaden Daniels. And in a one quarterback league, is there an argument to reach for Jaden Daniels over Caleb Williams?
Maybe at the back of the first round, yes. But I don't know how much of
there's an argument to rank and to reach for Jaden Daniels over Caleb Williams in Dynasty. And it depends on your play style, obviously. But one of these quarterbacks has a better chance of being a difference maker at the quarterback position, because in one quarterback leagues, there is hardly any positional advantage at the quarterback position. Even the top 5 quarterbacks, like you look at, let's say Joe Burrow, let's say Justin Herbert, right? These type of prolific throwers of the football, right? Justin Herbert was somebody who had some rushing ability, right? Coming out of college, but doesn't necessarily use it a whole lot in the NFL. Similar to Caleb Williams. We'll see, how much of his legs he ends up using. But now you have someone like Jaden Daniels who could end up being a Lamar and just break fantasy certain weeks.
Right.
Is Caleb going to do that? I don't know. Like maybe if he's Patrick Mahomes and he ends up throwing for 5 touchdowns, very possible. And maybe, running for 1 or whatever, but he's not going to give you those 50, 60 yards consistently, as a potential like Jaden Daniels can. So you look at what Lamar did, you look at what Justin Fields has done, right? And, you kind of have a combination of those two guys, hopefully longer tenure than Justin Fields. And you get someone like Jaden Daniels. Now, is it a lot more riskier than Caleb? Of course, because Caleb is somebody that, who has a higher chance of being on your roster and being your QB1 for like 10 years, opposed to Jaden Daniels, where you're like, all right, well, I'm shooting for the upside, but I'm hoping that, he can stay in the pocket when he needs to. He can go to his next read when he needs to. Otherwise, he's not going to be on the field too long, similar to Justin Fields, right? So that's really what it comes down to. But I do think in a one quarterback league, I think Jaden Daniels and Caleb Williams is way closer than in Superflex, where your room for error isn't as high, or isn't as great. I think that's what I'm trying to say.
I'll entertain that argument. I like that. I think that you have a good case there. But this is what's interesting to me now, because I'm considering, like, if I were in this situation, if I were sitting at the back of the first round, and I have a quarterback, like, let's say I have Dak Prescott, is Jaden Daniels the perfect pick? You know what I mean? Because Dak Prescott, and maybe Dak Prescott isn't the perfect example because he could switch teams after this season. So say you have a guy like Jared Goff, who's getting it done for you. He was just QB9 last year, right? He's one of those, you're not going to break into the top 5 with him, but you're also not going to be outside the top 12. He's going to have that consistent fantasy production for you every single week. If you're sitting there, they just signed him to a 4-year deal. He's in a great offensive situation, so you know what you're going to have. But do you pull the trigger on Jaden Daniels like that? I think that argument makes sense, because now that gives you the opportunity, especially if all your other options are off the board, if you don't like any of the options on the board and it's just Jaden Daniels sitting there, to get that positional advantage that you're talking about. So I actually see that perfectly clearly. If you have Jared Goff, you think that's like an auto pick at the back of the first round?
Yeah, I think so. I think Jared Goff's a perfect example, because you brought up a quarterback who will get it done for you, but doesn't provide any positional advantage, right? Opposed to, the Josh Allens of the world, right? If you had Josh Allen, then, you don't need to go after Jaden Daniels, right? But at the end of the day, there's also a case to be made of value. And will somebody, like, think about it right now, right? Even in a one quarterback league, what would somebody do to get Josh Allen? What was somebody do to get Lamar Jackson, right? Jalen Hurts, these type of players. I think their sticking value is pretty high, right? Even in one quarterback leagues. So I think Jaden Daniels can potentially, get to that level, at least for fantasy.
Now I raise you this question. One more before we go on. If you have a guy like, this one is really tricky for me. I don't know if it might not be tricky for you. What if you have a guy like Kyler Murray, who has a little bit of that rushing upside? He can turn in a top 3 2 performance on a weekly basis,
Mm-hmm.
every here and there. And he's also relatively young. So this isn't a guy that's going to be, he's not on his last contract of his career, presumably. Like,
Yeah.
where do you go in that situation?
If I had Kyler Murray, I'm chilling. I don't even care about quarterback, to be honest,
Okay.
because I think
So
he does have
yeah.
top 5 upside. You know,
Okay.
he
I
has
got
that.
you.
I think before his injury, I think he was in that top 5 conversation in terms for fantasy at least, right?
Yeah.
And he just hasn't been there. He's kind of like top 10 now, right? And I think him and Caleb Williams are like in dynasty value wise. I think they're right back to back. I think I have them back to back in my dynasty rankings. It's interesting, and we'll see. But in that situation, no, I don't think I would be.
Yeah.
I would care too much about quarterback. I would just build around Kyler
Right.
Murray.
The thing that complicates it for me is that he's been injured each of the past 2 seasons. Obviously, you can't pin everything and just say, "Oh, he's going to get injured again." But if you've gone through 2 seasons and he hasn't played a full season for you, he's missed significant time in 2 seasons straight. Like, do you start to think, okay, should I reload? Should I try somebody else at quarterback, especially with this upside? Like, that could be a reasonable out. If he would get injured again, at least you could fall back on somebody like Jane Daniels if he has to start the season. So
100%.
There's all different ways you can go with it.
Yeah, it's true. All right, you're on the clock here with the 11th pick in the first round. Keon, Coleman, Trey Benson, Xavier Legette, A.D. Mitchell, Ricky Pearsall, all on the board. You going with any of these guys?
I want to, yes, but I'm not going to go Keon Coleman because I know you hate Keon Coleman. You want to draft Keon Coleman now?
I do not hate Keon Coleman. How dare you? He's a fine gentleman.
Yeah, fine gentleman. Hilarious on the mic. I don't know if anybody listens. Yeah,
He's
if you listen to the hot
great
mic,
personality.
he's like, I don't want to compare him to the current GOAT of hot mic, Jameis Winston, but you know what I'm saying? Like, he's up there already. He has made a good first impression. I'm not going to go Keon Coleman here. I don't want to double dip at running back, but then you look at the wide receiver options. It's Xavier Legette, Ricky Pearsall.
But here's the thing. Just remember,
Mitchell.
This is not one team. Okay, we're drafting like individual teams here. So you did not already draft Jonathan Brooks.
Okay? Yeah. I know.
Yeah,
I know.
Okay, just want to make sure.
Maybe I just use the
wrong
wrong
11.
word.
Who would you pick?
If I were at 11, it would be between Trey Benson and A.D. Mitchell. And I think just because I just went on the whole tirade of saying I'm not going to go with the running back, these two are very close for me. I think I'm going to go with A.D. Mitchell just because I love his talent profile.
Can
I
know
the situation. Yes.
And be honest with me, okay?
Yeah.
Are the hype videos hyping you up? Are the A.D. Mitchell hype videos from rookie minicamp hyping you up at all?
Listen, I'm not impervious to a hype video here and there, all right? But I'm just saying. I mean, and we also heard he took number 10 because there are 10 receivers taken before him. I'm not buying into that 100%, but I do like his talent. I know he's sitting behind Michael Pittman here, but I think he can be a quality number 2. If you look at it, we've seen number 2 receivers get it done in the NFL plenty of times before. You don't need to be the number 1 wide receiver on your team, or at least on the depth chart, I should say, to be a good, solid fantasy contributor. I'm looking at Keon Coleman. You've listed your grievances with Keon Coleman. I'm on board with most of those. I look at Xavier Legette. There's just too much target competition with a question mark at quarterback there for him. Trey Benson, I don't want to go with that. The running back value, he's not going to be starting. James Conner's still there. He can take on more work as the year goes along and long term. But I'm going to value the wide receiver more here. I'm going to go with A.D. Mitchell. His profile is great in terms of his athleticism and all that. He's almost like, I don't want to say he's like a T. Higgins type just because they're two completely different receivers, but still, in terms of the way that he contribute in terms of his fantasy production, I think he can get it done, especially with Anthony Richardson at quarterback. And there's no really tight end in Indianapolis right now that's going to be mixing things up. I know Josh Downs is there in the slot, but I think that A.D. Mitchell can separate himself, especially within a year or two. I like his upside long term.
I like what you just said about like with him comparing him to T. Higgins. I kind of like that. Like I can see that a little bit, a little different, but I can see where you're going with that for sure. Yeah, and I think for me here, it would be between Trey Benson and I think Ricky Pearsall. I think those would be the two here. I'm a big Ricky Pearsall fan. He was a first round pick, and sometimes you just gotta go with these first round wide receivers. Despite the fact that he has a couple really good wide receivers ahead of him, right? Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel. But this league changes quick, man. Like, you just never know what's going to happen here. They took him in the first round for a reason. He is a very good separator. And I think if either of these guys, Brandon Ayuk, ends up getting traded, whatever, who knows? There's a lot of situations that could place Ricky Pearsall in a different, and we can be viewing him very differently, very soon. So in these rookie drafts, I try not to predict the future when it comes to personnel. When there's a good player on the board, on top of that, somebody I liked pre-draft, he was my, I think, wide receiver 6, or wide receiver 6 or wide receiver 7, something like that, going into the draft. And now, first round, paired with Kyle Shanahan, I'm just gonna go with Ricky Pearsall. I'm gonna hit the talent right here, and not worry about what they end up doing, and not try to predict what they end up doing personnel wise.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. I go with Ricky Pearsall there just because, like, this is like, it's like if you have a perfect, like, budding plant, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's in a really good pot of soil. It's going to get watered at some point, and it's going to appreciate. It's going to turn into this beautiful. I don't want to go like too girly
Please
here,
keep
but it's going to turn into a beautiful flower. You know what I'm saying? Like, he's going to have that value at some point. This is a perfect stash situation because not only are you getting him cheap, but he also has ridiculous upside because we know the 49ers are one of the most fantasy-friendly offenses in the league. So you can't go wrong here. We've seen that the cracks are already forming. There's cracks in the foundation underneath Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk. It's not a question, really, I think, in my opinion, of if one of them is going to get moved. It's just when. It might not even be until next season. But this is Dynasty. You're not going to lose Ricky Pearsall. You're not counting on him to produce this season. So for me, this is like the perfect stash pick. And I had a bunch of people. I've been in a bunch of drafts already where people are like screaming up and down getting Ricky Pearsall. And there are people in the draft, casuals, you understand, that are asking, they're like, well, why are you so happy about Ricky Pearsall? He's not even going to be playing this year. You got Brandon Ayuk and all these guys in front of him. It's like, just think about the situation. This is a long-term pick, and there's nothing wrong with a long-term pick. I like Ricky Pearsall here.
Zach, I wasn't planning on clipping anything from this episode, but now we have one.
Perfect. So awesome.
Love it.
That's what I
love
like.
It. I think at this point, it's relatively easy for me to go with Trey Benson. I think that's the pick here for me. No, wait, no, it's your pick. I'm so sorry.
Don't worry. I would have gone. I would have gone with Trey Benson anyway.
Are you going with Trey Benson? Okay, cool. I'm going to put Trey Benson here. But why go with him over guys like Keon, Coleman, Xavier, Legette? Two guys who were drafted, pretty high.
Yeah, they were drafted pretty high, but we also look at the situations that Keon Coleman is. I'm going to hit both of them. Keon Coleman. I know you have your own quips with Keon Coleman. I'm going to try and come up with my own here. But look at the target competition now that's suddenly there. They just signed MVS. And I'm not saying that he's going to be this huge contributor, to the target distribution, taking away targets. There's Khalil Shakir there. There's Dalton Kincaid. There's still James Cook. They target him downfield. He was one of 3 running backs to actually be like targeted downfield.
We're always forgetting Curtis Samuel. And I can't take it anymore, Zach. I can't take it anymore. This is the second episode in a row where you're disrespecting Curtis Samuel, and I can't take it anymore.
Okay, Curtis Samuel's there too. I was getting to him, but thank you. Anyway, I was just mentioning that James Cook is one of 3 running backs really to get targeted heavily downfield. It's him, Saquon Barkley, and I forget. There was another one it was Breece Hall. Was it Breece Hall?
Probably. Sure. It could have been Bijan. It could have been Breece. Yeah.
Yeah, but anyway, there were 3 running backs to have over 100 air yards. Talk about where they average their targets, where they get their targets. Most running backs are sitting at the line of scrimmage. It's like 0 negative yardage in terms of air yards. These guys are getting targeted downfield. You have Curtis Samuel too. There's all this target competition. Keon Coleman is the jump ball guy. I get it. There is appeal with Josh Allen. I said this on the last episode. Josh Allen likes to heave it downfield. And if you're going to be heaving it downfield to someone, you want it to be somebody that's good at the jump ball. That's Keon Coleman. But he's not separating. He's not going to be a target earner. You can't rely on those 50-yard heaves downfield from Josh Allen every single week to just keep paying off. So I'm not going to rely on that. I like what Trey Benson has. He's a very good talent. I think he could have been, drafted much higher than he was. I think he could have been a second-round pick if you ask me. But he goes to the Cardinals. He has James Conner in front of him. They're not going to run him into the ground immediately, which isn't a bad thing in terms of his longevity. But James Conner's nearing the end of his career. Not end of his career, but end of his fantasy relevant career, to the point where he's not going to be dominating backfields. Trey Benson within a year or two should have a pretty strong grip on that backfield. So I'm going to go with the ability to appreciate another appreciating player at a different position with Trey Benson.
Okay. All right. I love it. And guess what? Guess who I'm going with here?
Keon Coleman.
I'm going with Keon Coleman. Yeah. I think this is the spot here. I think with these guys off the board, I'm happy taking Keon Coleman at this spot, right? Trey Benson, Ricky Pearsall, A.D. Mitchell off the board. The other guys that are there are, Xavier Legette. I think Xavier Legette and Jalen Polk were actually going down the board a little bit. I think Jalen Polk is being a little underrated, even though he was taken early second round. I think he should be elevated a little bit compared to these guys, but I get it. Xavier Legette, also first round wide receiver, right? Carolina traded up into the first round to grab him at the end of day one. And, I think I'm a fan of Legette. I think as a person and as a player, yes, for sure. But he's a fifth year senior. He didn't produce until his last year. And does he have the physical gifts? I think he does. But I think there's a lot in his game where he needs to develop. And he's already at that point where, all right, well, is he going to develop? Is he going to earn those targets ahead of guys like Deontay Johnson? I don't know. Right. So I'm just going to go with the guy who's paired with one of the best quarterbacks in the league and who just lost a wide receiver one. Right. So I'm going to take the upside here. Right. And maybe Keon Coleman puts together a season like Cam Newton had. What's his name? Who's that? Kelvin Benjamin, his rookie year, came in and put up a big year off of straight up jump balls in the red zone. Right. So he fizzled out after that, but he had a great year because Cam Newton was willing to put it up there. Maybe Josh Allen will be willing to do the same. But I think that I'm not saying that I'm just complete. Did I mess up there?
No. I'm just saying, like, is Josh Allen inclined to throw the deep ball and just throw it out there? I think he is.
Oh yeah,
that's what I mentioned. Like, it's a perfect pairing in terms of what you want from your downfield receiver. If you're going to be throwing to anybody, it's Keon Coleman.
Yeah. So I think there is value there, right? Like I get, I've been talking a lot about Keon Coleman, how you can't separate this and that, but I'm not saying he has no value, right? I think there is some value here. Okay. So anyway, let's move on. So I think the rest of these picks, I think now we're in the second round. We're going to keep the analysis relatively short the rest of the way, but we do want you guys to understand like who we're taking and why we're taking them. Okay. So let's go on now. Keon Coleman off the board. Who are we taking at the third spot in the second round?
All right. I'm going to go down. I know he's down the board a little bit, and we were just talking about him. I'm going to go with Jalen Polk here. And the only reason I say that is, like you mentioned, he's being a little underrated. He was drafted high in the second round, which is higher than I think we even thought he would go. So that's a good thing. Obviously, higher draft capital is always a good thing for a receiver, but he's in a situation where he could easily step in and he might not be a clear like wide receiver one on the Patriots, especially with the rookie quarterback, Drake May. I'm not sure exactly what that's going to look like, but they're going to have to throw the ball to somebody. If he's a 1A in an offense, like taking that, I'll go with him, if that's the case, especially this far down the board. I don't like Xavier Legette as much as a long-term or short-term. You look at the offense he's in, Deontay Johnson's there, Adam Thielen is there, the running back, Jonathan Brooks is there. He might be involved in receiving game. It's Bryce Young at quarterback. He might still need a year or two to develop to make more than one wide receiver fantasy relevant. We saw that last year with Adam Thielen, and Jonathan Mingo's there too. Everybody just forgot about him. So it's like you got all of these different parts moving in the Panthers offense. Xavier Legette, he's there at the top of the ADP, but I'm going to go with Jalen Polk here because we talked about him. He's a sleeper.
And with that being said, I am going to go with Xavier Legette here with the fourth pick in the second round. It's like one of those things where like both of these guys kind of just, if I'm sitting here at 2-4, 2-2, like these guys just kind of fell into my lap, right? That's kind of how I feel about it, opposed to like me, going extra hard to try to get these guys. I think these guys have some value, okay? They're, at the end of the day, Legette is a first round wide receiver. So I'm going to go there. Don't get me wrong, though. I'm taking Trey Benson before Keon Coleman. I'm taking Jalen Polk before Xavier Legette. Okay, just like you did, Zach. Okay.
Perfect.
We talked a lot about these guys already, so let's move forward. Who you got with the 5th pick in the second round?
I'm going on the board. I'm not ready for the next quarterback yet. I'm not interested in Blake Corum at this point. I don't know if I want to draft my handcuff right now. He's going to be a high value handcuff, but I don't want to draft my handcuff at the 5th pick in the second round. So I'm going to go with a guy that has a chance to appreciate again into a very valuable running back. I'm going to go with Marshawn Lloyd because I don't think I don't think it's that crazy. Look at the other receivers, like Troy Franklin's there. He's with Bo Nix, yes, but he was a 4th round wide receiver, which I still don't know why that happened. He fell down the board. So obviously there's something going on there. I don't think Troy Franklin, he's on an offense. Obviously, Bo Nix is reportedly looking pretty good, but I don't know if he's going to be able to produce at the level that we want him to. I don't know if he's ever going to out target a guy like Courtland Sutton as long as he's there, just the role that he plays. And then Roman Wilson's there too, but we know that the Steelers, they have their running backs in order. Quarterback situation is still a question mark, even though they have 2 pretty solid starters. There's a lot of back and forth there. Marshawn Lloyd at running back. We know the Packers aren't tied to Josh Jacobs long term. I'm going with Marshawn Lloyd.
Yeah, me too. I love this pick here, and I think he's been going later in drafts, right? Like his ADP has been late second roundish, right? His ADP has been creeping up a little bit, as it should. If you ask me, like, hey, who's going to be more successful in the NFL, Marshawn Lloyd or Xavier Legette? For me, the answer is easy, and that's Marshawn Lloyd. Okay, for some reason, like the way that I'm thinking like, okay, well, maybe I'll be able to get Marshawn Lloyd with Team 7, in another pick since I'm picking next. That's like how I'm thinking about it. But if you're sitting, at your Team 9 here, on the board, which means that you're picking at the 4th spot in the second round, and Lloyd's still on the board, Xavier Legette still on the board. I think Lloyd is easily the safer pick for sure because Josh Jacobs, like you mentioned, like he's basically on a 1-year deal, and Lloyd can come in and basically take over that backfield sooner than you think. So I do love that pick. So if I'm actually on the clock, like early second round, and I'm only making 1 pick in the second round, middle of second round, I think it has to be Marshawn Lloyd, man, in 1 QB. I think if I'm going to pick one guy, it might be him. I think he's one of the most underrated picks in this draft. And it's weird because I know I just picked Xavier Legette right before him, but I'm just saying. Okay.
But that was the thing. And then you have to balance that. It's like, okay, if a player falls to me, do I reach on the guy that I'm that might be a sleeper, or do I go with the guy that just fell into my lap? Like for me, I would probably defer to the talent that fell to me. That's just me. And I think there's also the factor too that you mentioned. He's a 1st round receiver. So
exactly. All right. So you picked Marshawn Lloyd with the 5th pick in the second round. And now we have Blake Corum, JJ McCarthy, Drake May, Troy Franklin, Roman Wilson, Jalen Wright, all on the board. So now we're at the point where I think I'm going to go with Blake Corum here. He is a handcuff, obviously, at this point, but he is in a powerful Rams offense with Sean McVay, who is not afraid to use a bell cow running back. If anything were to happen to Kyren Williams, Blake Corum is potentially a plug-and-play RB1, right? So that's really what that's all you got to say about Blake Corum at this point. So I do like him. Obviously, I mentioned the guys on the board. If you need a quarterback, you maybe go quarterback here. If you had to pick between JJ McCarthy and Drake May, are you going with Drake May here?
With Drake May, I think I would go with JJ McCarthy if I had to pick a quarterback. Do you think we go quarterback here? Like we can kind of team up on this one.
It is your pick here.
It is my pick
with the 7th pick in the second round.
Yeah, I was looking down the board a little bit. I don't know. I think people might fall for that. They might look at Drake May and be like, "Oh, he's a number 3 pick." He was drafted higher than JJ McCarthy, so he has to come off the board earlier than JJ McCarthy, right? I think people might kind of fall into that trap. But you look at the situation JJ McCarthy's in, I might lean into the hopefully you don't take JJ McCarthy after this. I might lean into that stigma saying that, okay, Drake May has come off the board before JJ McCarthy. I'm going to look down the board again, and I'm going to go with Malachi Corley here because I don't know what you think of that, but I'm going to go with this one here. I'm looking at the offense he's in. There's Garrett Wilson, and then there's Mike Williams, who's there for 1 year, and then there's really nobody else unless you're concerned about a guy like Alan Lazard, which I'm not. I look at the quarterback situation. Hopefully Aaron Rodgers can stick around a little bit. Maybe he gets a year, 2 years out of him, but I think Malachi Corley, he does a lot after the catch very well. I like the talent. He's different. He's not something that the Jets have. I think that he can really carve out a role for himself, especially if Mike Williams would get hurt. Malachi Corley could have a role this year too. So I'm going to go with Malachi Corley here and just hope that one of the quarterbacks fall down the board.
If there's a guy that I'm avoiding, I think it's Malachi Corley. If I'm going to avoid one guy,
but you're a Jets fan. Round,
you're a Jets fan. I know. But I definitely don't trust their offensive coordinator to scheme anything up for a guy whose main thing is after the catch. We're always looking for this Debo type of player. We haven't found him yet, right? We found one guy, and his name is Debo Samuel. I don't know if we're ever going to find that guy. Malachi Corley, good player. Saw him at the Senior Bowl. Really nice guy, tough guy. But is he going to be somebody who can separate and not just depend on that after the catch ability and get that 1.8 depth of target and then like have to take it down the field 10 yards for you to do anything with it.
Right. Okay, I hear you. But just gonna throw this one out there. Jayden Reed, I don't want to say he's Debo Samuel yet, but Jayden Reed has been used similarly a little bit.
Yes, but
he gives me shades of Debo, at least. Sure. I don't want to just leave him out of the conversation.
And I think that's how he ended up scoring his fantasy points last year. But I think he's capable of way more in being an actual wide receiver. So I think I totally understand what you're saying. And actually, Jayden Reed is somebody who scored way more fantasy points than his expected total was supposed to be. So if there is any regression candidate going into year 2, it's him. But he could also make that up with more volume, because he's a good player. So we'll see.
Give and take. Yep.
Yeah, give and take. So for me personally, I'm going to go Drake May here. I think Drake May has a little bit of that Josh Allen in him. He has a little bit of that rushing ability. He's a big body. I think that he can – listen, he's a sneaky rusher, okay? He's averaging more rushing yards per game than a lot of the rushing quarterbacks that you would imagine in the NFL. So I think – he's somebody who can come in and play a little bit more of that role than you might think. And I think at this point, the fact that, I think that he is a pretty good prospect. I think like with him, anyone doubting him is like really about, prospect fatigue, right? We've been talking about him for so long. We've been talking about him in 2023 even. So I think that's one of those situations. So I think Drake May would be the pick here for me with the 8th pick in the 2nd round. I think he's a solid quarterback. Who are you going with the next pick?
Let's double down at quarterback. I'm going to go with J.J. McCarthy. Just because I know that the situation is fantastic. I think he can mold into just pretty much another Kirk Cousins. I'm not a huge fan of the prospect, J.J. McCarthy. I'm not a huge fan of what he does outside of a system because we haven't really seen it. I don't want to roll the dice on that, but because we know he's in a good system with Kevin O'Connell, he has the weapons. He's one of the safest picks for me. If he turns into a QB8, QB9, QB10 perennial, like I'm perfectly fine with that, getting him in the 2nd round. Obviously, it's a 1 QB league. But if you have that, if you don't have security at quarterback, I think J.J. McCarthy is a good pick for you.
Okay. All right. So I think at this point of the 2nd round, we're in the 10th pick of the 2nd round. I think Troy Franklin is an option for me. Jalen Wright is also an option for me. Jermaine Burton is an option for me. And, when I'm sitting on the board here, it's hard for me. I'm not going to make the same mistake I made earlier and go like Xavier Legette over Marshawn Lloyd. So I don't want to do that again. I don't want to get burned. So I'm going to reach all the way down here, despite being in the 2nd round, and I'm going to go Jermaine Burton. And it's a similar situation that Ricky Pearsall's in, right? Where, how much of the field is he going to see? Same situation with T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, but another potential trade type of situation here with T. Higgins, who knows if he's going to be on the team for that much longer. So Burton's somebody who fell in the draft because character concerns, off the field concerns, that sort of thing. So we'll see how that ends up going. But the talent is clear, man. Talent is clear. So going Jermaine Burton here a little bit earlier than he normally goes. He usually goes like maybe early 3rd round. But I'm going to not miss my opportunity this time around.
Well, think about it this way. If this were a super flex draft, let's see, Bo Nix would be off the board. Michael Penix might even be off the board based on how my draft went today. I was just talking about it. So say you shove Jermaine Burton down 2 picks, suddenly he's in the 3rd round, or at least the very end of the 2nd round. So it's like, this I don't think is a reach. I think this is fine. And it might feel like a reach because you're going down the ADP board, but I think Jermaine Burton's a great pick. I know he's a favorite of yours too. Just besides that off-field issue that we've talked about, we beat to death every time we mention him. So now that he's off the board, I'm looking at the board here. I don't want to take a tight end. I know Ben Sinnott's there. I know he has a chance to kind of not break out as like a top tight end, but he could have a role. I don't want to go for a role tight end right now, especially in offense with a rookie quarterback that we're not sure how much he's going to throw the ball in year one. We know that Jaden Daniels, I wouldn't be surprised to see him tuck and run a little bit more this season than he will maybe 2 or 3 years down the line. So he's off the radar for me. Troy Franklin's there. Roman Wilson's there. I don't like either of them too much. We're at that point where it's like, okay, now we know we're not hitting, home runs. We're not really super excited about all these picks, but now we're shooting for upside. I think I'm going to go with Jalen Wright. Just because he's in that scheme in Miami where they're going to be clearing the way for him. He's going to have that open running space, like you mentioned. I'm not super excited about any of these guys on the board. Troy Franklin, if he were drafted a little bit higher in the actual NFL draft, got a little bit better draft capital, I might be more inclined to take him. But at this point, I'm not sure how they're going to use him. I know that Bo Nix is there. He has that connection to the quarterback. But I'm going to go with Jalen right here.
And I'm going to go with Troy Franklin. I think Troy Franklin is somebody, again, I love these guys, who I haven't been so high on. I drafted all of them. Like, I literally, look at this entire second round, dude. I drafted Keon Coleman, Xavier Legette, Blake Corum, and Troy Franklin.
Well, I wouldn't say you weren't. Okay. Pre-draft, calling him overrated. Pre-draft. I know a lot of people were upset about that. But now that he's in a situation where, do you think him being overrated kind of gets neutralized because he's going to be playing like a second fiddle role, a handcuff role? I feel like
who are you talking about?
Blake Corum.
Oh, Blake
Corum. Because we're not going to see him right off the bat, presumably as the lead back in any backfield. Like, it's going to be hard to analyze whether you were right or wrong with that call. You know what I mean? So you kind of have your ass covered there, which is pretty interesting if you think about it. But I think I was between Troy Franklin and Jalen Wright, but I'm happy with Jalen Wright because I would have
taken Jalen Wright as well, man. All right, who you got with the first pick in the third?
First pick in the third round. Wow, the board's a little barren here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna go with Bo Nix, and is it going to be? Look, Troy Franklin and Bo Nix going back to back, same team. Is it going to be me buying a little bit into hype? Not necessarily hype videos, but we heard good things out of camp, early camp from Bo Nix. He is going to be a starting quarterback. You know what I mean? So this is the third round now. He has Cortland Sutton to throw to. He has a familiarity with Troy Franklin. He's in a good offensive scheme, presumably, and one that should fit what he wants to do, what Sean Payton wants to run. I think Bo Nix is a fine pick here, especially because I'm not really super excited about any of these other guys on the board.
Ben Sinnott is my next pick here, taken by Washington earlier than a lot of people thought they would, but, decent prospect, could be tight end one on this team as early as year one, right? If I'm not mistaken, Zach Ertz is there, right?
He is.
And, he'll get some tutelage under him. So, maybe this could work out here. So I'm going to go with Ben Sinnott. Maybe we can get a sleeper tight end off the board.
Yeah, as a second red zone target, especially because they don't really have that outside Terry McLaurin on the Washington offense. So if he could be a red zone option for them, like we've seen tight ends get it done just by pretty much virtue of tight end, what's called red zone production, end zone targets alone. Think Jawan Johnson, think Hunter Henry. Like, it's not that far fetched. Obviously, those are some veterans, but they can get it done. So I like that.
All right, who's your next one? Third pick in the third round.
I'm going to go with Javon Baker here. Okay. And I because we know he's underrated. He has a chance to contribute in an offense. The offense in New England is wide open. Targets can go any which way. But if there are two guys that I kind of trust to have a role in this offense, I think it's Jalen Polk and I think it's Javon Baker. I know you like Demario Douglas. You like your little Pop Douglas as well in that offense. But assuming that there isn't a clear separator in target earning, which I don't think there's going to be, like Javon Baker's going to have his games this year. And if he can stick around, show a little bit, then I think he has a chance to be a contributor for the next 2 or 3 years. Obviously not in any type of wide receiver 1 capacity, maybe not even wide receiver 2, but as a solid wide receiver 3 flex on this offense, I think he can get it done.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I'm not convinced that he's going to be a year one contributor at all. But hey, listen, his rookie minicamp, it's looking pretty good so far. I think he's a good receiver. I think he needs to develop just a little bit, but I was a big fan of him and his game.
Yeah.
Obviously, not playing in the Power Five his whole career, it's tough to evaluate him. But it seems like he's making a little bit of an impact already in rookie minicamp. So, looking forward to seeing that, and obviously saw him at the Senior Bowl as well. So, um, big fan of Baker, and I think he was one of the biggest steals at the wide receiver position. Taking him in the 4th round for the Patriots, really, really good pick, combining him with Jalen Polk. Here, this is it's getting a little tough, right? And I think, Roman Wilson's still sitting here, Luke McCaffrey's still sitting here. A couple of, day 2 wide receivers. I'm looking down the line here. I don't see anybody that I really, really want. But at the end of the day, like if I need a running back, I think Ray Davis is somebody that you should be looking at because he could get, some value. He could be valuable off the bat, right? But
Right.
I am going to go with the higher draft capital receivers here. I'm going to go Luke McCaffrey. In Washington, he could end up, being the primary slot receiver. Jahan Dotson is going to stick around probably as their maybe their flanker. I would say that, Lieutenant McLaurin's going to stick around, obviously, as their X, and the slot wide receiver role is probably between him and
Luke McCaffrey,
Jamison Crowder, right? Like those are like the two, like I think those are the two slot receivers that they have in the team as of right now because Curtis Samuel left. So he can easily win that job, potentially be a starter year one.
Don't forget Curtis Samuel. Don't. Never forget. Anyway, on that note, I'm also just going to default with the higher draft capital. I'll go with Roman Wilson here. We know he's taken in 3rd round. It's not that I don't like the landing spot. The quarterback situation is a little questionable, but there isn't that much target competition at wide receiver outside of George Pickens at this point. With Deontay Johnson gone, they have the number 1 target earner from last year and many years prior in Deontay Johnson leaving. Like, I'm interested to see how things shake out in that wide receiver room. Could it lean Roman Wilson's way here or there? I'm not expecting him to be a full-time contributor on the offense. We know that his role doesn't really fit what Arthur Smith likes to run, but still, you have the guys in the backfield too, Najee Harris and Jalen Warren, who are going to get targets. He might not be an every week starter for you, but I think he has a chance to at least contribute in a pinch here or there. He's not the worst pick. Obviously, we're at the point. This is what dart throwing looks like at the end of the draft. We're just like, what the heck? Like, that's the point that we're at in this draft.
100%. And you're not going to catch me drafting Michael Penix, in this 1 QB mock draft. Just saying, unless he falls to me in the 4th round.
I'll let him fall in the 4th round.
But even if he does, we're probably not going to take him. Jatavian Sanders still sitting here, decent pick. Braylon Allen sitting behind Breece Hall. Bucky Irving, I'm a big fan of him. Audric Estime, does he have a chance of winning that role? I don't know. I think this is getting really tough here, man. I think I'm going to go with the guy that I really like a lot, man, and that's Bucky Irving. Bucky Irving, could end up taking a little bit of a role in Tampa. We'll see if he ends up. I don't think he's going to necessarily usurp Rachaad White, but I think he could carve out a little bit of role for himself. So I'm going to go Bucky Irving here. I think he's a good running back.
Yeah, I like that pick. That's a good one. I think I'm going to go with Jalen McMillan here at this pick.
Okay.
We saw him contribute with 2 other very good wide receivers of Washington. He had a strong season, and they have Baker Mayfield, who's going to be throwing the ball a ton. Liam Cohen's going to be drawing things up. It's going to be a pass-first offense. They're down in Tampa Bay. I like Jalen McMillan here as just a dart throw. Obviously, Mike Evans is going to be a problem in terms of target earning, target distribution. But Chris Godwin, I don't want to say he's on his way out, but I think if either one of those two are going to be replaced, I don't think it's going to happen this season. But if you talk about long-term prospects, if he's going to take a role, he might take over the number 2 spot much faster over Chris Godwin than he would, say, Mike Evans. I think Mike Evans has plenty of time left in his career. So I'm going to go with Jalen McMillan.
I mean, listen, Chris Godwin, he would have to leave the team, right, in order for Jalen McMillan to take over, like, talent-wise. Right,
talent-wise, talent stays. Do you think talent doesn't come and go? You have it or you don't. There's talented receivers and there's guys that just get targets, that kind of thing. I don't think your talent changes with your age. It's just a matter of what you can execute. You know what I'm saying?
Sure. I'm just saying that I think Chris Godwin had to leave the team physically in order for Jalen McMillan to be a thing in the slot. That's all I'm saying.
I got you.
This
is the third round. I'm not taking anything personally. Third round. We're what?
I hear that.
How many
Brendan Rice is being taken, even though he's a seventh round pick. He's pretty high up here in the ADP.
It's called name value.
Did you hear Jerry Rice said he's going to be a part of every one of his workouts from here on out because they have a lot of doubters to prove, which is interesting to me. Well, I like it though because I was a fan of him. To be honest with you. All right. So, I like Braylon Allen. I like Audric Estime. A lot of competition in that backfield, but I think Ray Davis is the pick for me here. I keep not clicking this properly.
Yeah.
But Ray Davis is who I'm picking here. 8th pick in the 3rd round. I think this is a pretty good value. Could carve out a role on early downs, goal line role, that sort of thing. I think that's why they drafted him. They were looking for that type of back. So I think he's a very, very solid pick here in the 3rd round.
Right. All right. So I'm going to go. I saw this post on Instagram like 2 days ago, maybe a day or 2 ago. And it was about this Chargers backfield and how there might be this sleeper in the backfield that might take over, might beat Gus Edwards. It seemed like the guy knew what he was talking about. I don't know. But I'm going to go with Kamani Vidal here just because, it's the 3rd round. What could possibly go wrong? We're just going with a guy that could carve out a role for himself in an offense that, has a couple players in the backfield that aren't, set in stone who's going to be the starting running back. I'm going to go with Kamani Vidal here. I just have a good feeling about it. What do you think of that for us?
Yeah, I think that's pretty solid. I don't know who you're talking about, who posted that, but I think this is a pretty solid pick. I think, between him and Gus Edwards, like there's a shot that they end up being the 1A, 1B in this backfield. J.K. Dobbins coming off the Achilles, so who knows? Like I can totally see that happening. Listen, I'm a fan of Audric Estime, and I know that there's a lot of running backs in that backfield, and Estime is not one of the guys that Sean Payton has been hyping up. Okay, there's been another rookie that Sean Payton has been hyping up a little bit. Okay, who are we talking about here, Zach? Right, obviously you got Javonte Williams as the RB1. You had Jaleel McLaughlin last year coming out of nowhere, undrafted free agent. Okay, they just drafted Audric Estime, but there's another running back.
Alvin
why don't you give him a little? Why don't you give him Alvin Kamara? Why don't you give him a little bit of a preview?
A little sneak preview. Yeah, we got Blake Watson. Now I'm not taking Blake Watson here. Just to be clear, I'm not taking Blake Watson at 311 unless you want me to. I mean, I can just for the sake of it, but I'm not going to. We're not going. Where is he even on the ADP? It's crazy.
He's undrafted.
Yeah, undrafted. Yeah. Is he even in the sleeper app?
He's here. I see him. Yeah.
Oh, there he is. There he is.
I see him.
He's here. 301. Jeez. Okay. Yeah. But anyway, this is a guy that's making a little noise for Sean Payton. So don't completely write him off. I'm not saying draft him, but pay attention after the draft. Remember, a lot of people picked up Puka Nacua late sometimes. And obviously, anybody who was listening to podcasts would have drafted Puka Nacua, but I'm sure there were situations, because I was one of them, where Puka Nacua made it past the draft, and then I added him as an undrafted free agent, and we all know how that went. So that was great.
Exactly. Who are you picking here at 311, Zach?
I'm just going to go quick here. I'm going to go with Devontae Walker. He's something that the Ravens don't have on the outside in terms of receiver. They have Rashad Bateman. They have Zay Flowers, 2 guys that are relatively not. Rashad Bateman isn't undersized, but Zay Flowers is undersized. They said that they wanted a big body on the outside for the Ravens offense for Lamar to work with, and Devontae Walker is that. He has upside. He has a long way to go to achieving it, but I think he can do it with a good quarterback and a pretty solid offense.
I'm with you, man. I think I gotta go to Jatavian Sanders here. Carolina, he could be the clear tight end 1 for them. So I think with behind Deontay Johnson, I don't know who's going to be earning targets. So we'll see. I think Jatavian Sanders is in line to compete for that. All right. So that's with the last pick of the 3rd round. Who are we going with the first pick of the 4th?
All right. There's 2 handcuff running backs that I'm kind of looking at. It's between Braylon Allen and Isaac Guerrero, and I think I'm going to go with Isaac Guerrero just because I trust the offense a little bit more to favor Isaac Guerrero in that case. The 49ers offense is going to be better for Isaac Guerrero in a handcuff role than maybe Braylon Allen, because we also have Isaiah Davis there in New York where they can mix him in. That's a very short answer, but I'm going to go with Guerrero.
Yeah, but then there's also what's his name, right? They San Francisco has
I heard
not Jordan Mason.
Yeah.
But
is it Jordan Mason?
No, it's not Jordan Mason.
No, it's not Jordan Mason. I know who you're talking about. It's not Elijah Mitchell, is it?
Elijah Mitchell. There you go. Elijah Mitchell.
Right.
Elijah Mitchell is the other back that Kyle Shanahan loves, and I can see a situation where he still ends up being the guy who closes out games. But Guerrero is somebody we should be looking out for too, because he has
burner,
game-changing speed. I think this is the point where we should be taking Braylon Allen. He was somebody that would have been taking the second round of rookie drafts if it was a different landing spot. So very, very young player sitting behind Breece Hall, but could be a handcuff type of situation if they did draft another running back 1 round later. So we have to see what that competition looks like. But at the end of the day, that other running back played in the FCS. So who knows how that's going to turn out. Okay. Third pick in the 4th round, Zach. Who are you going
Ready
with?
for this
Michael
one?
Penix still on the board, buddy.
Yeah, I'm not taking Michael Penix. Forget it. I'm going with a former wide receiver who has a potential, and I'm not saying he's going to beat Devin Singletary, but he has a chance to be a contributor in the offense. It might be on a bad offense. I'm going with Tyrone Tracy.
Nice.
I think he has a solid chance to be at least a role player. Like I mentioned, it does suck that the offense he's going to be on is going to suck, but he could carve out a name for himself, especially if things go south. If the Giants just decide, we want to try these guys out, Devin Singletary is a veteran. Let's see what we have. If he can establish himself a little bit, he could have a role. He might not be an RB1 role, but he could have a starting role, a role where he gets a significant number of snaps, moving forward. I'll take that investment in the 4th round any day. He can appreciate enough to the point that makes him worth taking.
One of my favorite picks in the 4th round, Tyrone Tracy. 100%. Love that pick for all the reasons that you just said. I'm looking at the board now. Looking a little bleak. I'm definitely considering Malik Washington here. I do like the pairing in Miami, although obviously target share is going to be a concern to start off, but I do like him as a player, which is why I'm considering him here. And I think I am going to consider him here, and I'm going to take him. I think Malik Washington is going to be my pick with the 4th pick in the 4th round. I think obviously Tyreek Hill's there. Who knows how long he's going to be there before he transitions over to corn. And then, obviously you have another very, very, very good wide receiver in
Waddle.
Sorry, it's late. Waddle.
It's
Jalen
late.
Waddle.
422.
It's late in the day.
Jalen
Waddle.
Day.
Yeah. Here, so I think I like Malik Washington a lot pre-draft, and the fact that he's paired with Mike McDaniel, somebody who has proven to scheme up wide receivers very, very nicely. I'm gonna go with Malik Washington. Who you got with the 5th pick in the 4th round, Zach?
We're going Brendan Rice, just because I heard that Jerry Rice is going to help him train.
I heard about that.
I think if there is an offense, any offense where a 7th round receiver has a shot at being a contributor, it's the Chargers offense right now.
Yeah.
Because they're in flux, and then there's no clear number 1 in that offense. There's no clear number 2 in that offense. There's no solid part of the offense besides maybe the offensive line, which you're working on solidifying. So I'm okay with Brendan Rice in the 4th round. I wouldn't reach any higher for him, though.
I think this is the point in the draft where I am going to have to take the guy that Sean Payton is going crazy over, and that's Blake Watson.
Go for it.
I'm gonna go for it, man. Because listen, we're shooting darts.
That's all you can say at this point. Like, what's the analysis on this? This is when you start pulling shooting on those darts. Quotes. Yeah. You just, I heard a quote about this guy one time. Let's go for it. Like, there's no analysis. There's no analysis that really goes into these. Like, you can look at the profiles and all that.
I heard this coach likes this player, so I'm going to go for it.
That's the same way I ended up with Alan Lazard on my team. No, I'm kidding. I did not draft Alan Lazard. Just want to put that out there. I'm not one of those guys. But now we're in the 4th round. I'm going to go with Michael Penix just for shits and giggles. We're doing Michael Penix because he has to come off the board at some point. And the truth is, it sucks. He's not going to play up front. But if he sees the field with anything close to the type of offense they're going to be fielding in Atlanta at any point, like, this is a guy, he was drafted top 10. Like, there's nothing wrong with Michael Penix besides the fact that he's not on the field. That's all you have to say about him. But that's obviously the biggest part when it comes to fantasy.
I'm scrolling so far down this list just to see like who's there. You know what I'm saying? Like any names that I recognize. But, to be honest with you, you kind of just got to go with the guys on the board, man. Will Shipley's on the board here. Not a huge Will Shipley guy. But listen, PPR in PPR, he's a little bit of a pass catcher. So you never know. I don't think that he is the clear handcuff to Saquon Barkley because they still have Kenny Gainwell there. We know how much they like him. So I could totally see this being either a Kenny Gainwell backfield if Saquon were to get hurt, or a combination of Shipley and Gainwell, meaning that there will be no fantasy value in that backfield if Saquon were to get hurt. So, but there's a little bit of upside here, so we'll go Shipley.
It's funny. I'm looking down the board and seeing a couple names that are interesting. We have Tua Tagovailoa. No, I'm kidding. It's Talia. He's way down the board. And then there's also I saw T. Owens on the 49ers. I'm like, nah, it's Terrell Owens. But I think it's actually his son. Isn't Tariq Owens his son?
I don't know. That's a good question.
I think he is. I think he's on the 49ers, which is pretty crazy. I'm just looking at I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure Tariq Owens, I think that's his son. I'm not exactly sure. But just a little nugget there in case you're looking for more family lineage. We had Brandon Rice go in the 4th round. If you want to take a deep stab.
Tariq Owens is Terrell Owens' son. Yeah.
On a Shanahan offense? 49ers? Oh, my God. Why are we drafting Ricky Pearsall again? No, I'm kidding. I'm lying. But anyway, we talked about that productive wide receiver in Arizona. He's also on the 49ers, oddly enough. How many 49ers wide receivers are we going to take that could blossom into something else? I'm going to go Jacob Cowing here because he was extremely productive. I'm not going to hold that against him. Obviously, the teams he was doing it against, not exactly top-notch, but still, I'm going to go with it at this point. He has a chance to be, if he sees any time on the field as an extremely productive receiver with Brock Purdy, like I'm fine with that.
I think that is the pick here for sure. I'm going to go Dylan Laube because he's a very, very good pass catcher. Can he amount to anything more than that? I don't know. Can he be anything more than a satellite back? I don't think so. But end of the 4th round, PPR back. Let's take a shot.
Right. And then now it's down to me. I don't know. I don't like anybody on the board here. I'm gonna go with Eric All, just because. You're wrong tight end. I'm gonna go with Eric All just because he's going to be tied to Joe Burrow if he is anything significant, if he sticks on the roster. So I'm good. I'll take him over Theo Johnson, who has Daniel Jones or the next guy up, and that's the difference for me.
I'm not a big fan of Theo Johnson, but is he going to be tight end 1 for the Giants once Darren Waller retires? Maybe. Who knows? That's it. That's all we got. This is it, man. This is it. Now, I'll be honest with you, man. This wasn't like, if I had to grade all of my picks, I don't know if I would grade it that well, because if you look at the picks one for one, like I didn't love them. Like I liked a lot of the guys you picked because you reached for like your guys, you know what I mean? Yeah. Which is kind of what you have to do in a rookie draft.
That's why Caleb Williams went at 105.
But that's what you kind of have to do in a rookie draft, though, right? Because you have one pick in each round. I mean, maybe not because you traded your picks or whatever. But like, I think that's kind of what you got to do, man. You just got to go for your guys. But the thing is, if we went for our guys, then there'll be a bunch of like shit bags, just sitting at the end of the draft, end of these rounds, and it wouldn't have been a more clear indication of how these drafts would actually go, if that makes sense, right? So. Right. So this is kind of how we're taking it. So we'll be posting this on Instagram. You can take a final look at it. But that's pretty much going to do it, guys. If you can like and subscribe to the channel, YouTube channel would be amazing. If you can rate and review the podcast on podcasting platforms, that would be amazing as well. But that's it. That's going to do it for this episode, guys. We appreciate you and thanks for listening and watching. And we will be back. Whoa! Oh my God, that's huge. We'll be back soon. Take it easy. Yeah. See you guys. Bye.